Hello, and welcome back to Bearing Birth, a birth story podcast highlighting the emotional impact of birth, the immediate postpartum period, and the years beyond. I'm Jordan, a doula specializing in postpartum support.
And I'm Sophie, a perinatal mental health therapist. We have one of my absolute favorite people on the podcast today, my good friend Edith. Edith and I used to work together before I moved to Portland, and we've stayed in touch over the years. She's also come to visit me once with her daughter, and she has one of the most contagious laughters, which you will get to hear today.
Oh my gosh, I love her so much. I'm so happy that you brought her on the podcast because I agree. I feel like we laughed a lot with her, and we might have to cut some of it out because it just goes on and on. But yeah, it was so great to meet her and hear her story. She definitely brought a whole new perspective to the podcast with how much detail she went into about what it's like to be a parent to a 16-year-old and an 8-year-old, and like really did a good job of tying that in with her birth story and how that affected her experience with birth and how that affected her attachment with each of her kids.
Yeah, I really admire Edith as a person and as a parent, and I just feel really grateful that she came on and was willing to do this. I think she's so thoughtful and intentional as a parent, and we really got to see that in how she spoke about parenting her 2 kids and just the amount of self-reflection and introspection that she does too. I hope to be able to teach my daughter the same amount of unconditional love that she teaches and shows her kids. And I know that I'll call her up when I navigate the teen years with my daughter, and I've definitely already looked up to her and asked her questions over the months that I've been a parent.
I can see why. I feel like this whole episode, I was in awe of her parenting skills and just her ability to hold space for her kids and teaching them like emotional empathy and all this kind of just teaching them so much. And I just kept fighting the urge to tell her how great of a parent I think she is. And it's just really amazing the work she's doing to break generational cycles. And it's really important. In this episode, Edith talks through her 2 births, one unplanned C-section and another planned C-section. Neither of them went exactly as planned. And she also goes into detail about her fertility journey, including a miscarriage.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about the duality of emotions, being ecstatic and overjoyed with meeting your baby for the first time and all that there is to be happy about with becoming a mother, and also how painful some of the processing can be.
Yeah, I loved getting into like the mixed emotions. We're biased, but we really think this episode is amazing, and we hope that you do too. I don't think you'll regret tuning in. It's such a good conversation.
And lastly, some content warnings include miscarriage, mother-baby separation, needles, gestational diabetes, lack of informed consent from providers, cesarean births, and a NICU stay. Just want to say thank you again so much to Edith for coming on, and, we appreciate every guest's vulnerability and openness to coming on.
Yeah, it really does mean everything to us, and it's really helping to remove the secrecy and stigma behind everything related to birth. Enjoy!
Enjoy!
A doula and a therapist are sitting down to talk about birth. A doula and a therapist are sitting down to talk about birth.
Do you want to start with how your pregnancy, or I guess it's totally up to you which birth story you want to tell, whether you want to tell both. Normally we ask if you want to start with how like the end of your pregnancy was leading up to birth.
Okay. Yeah, that works.
Okay.
Do I just start talking?
Yeah, you just start talking.
Yeah, I guess I'll ask like a more specific question. Like, so for your first birth, how was it being pregnant for the first time, and how did that go leading up to your first birth?
So I have probably like a weird sixth sense with pregnancies. I'll say with my daughter, my first one, even just finding out I was pregnant, it was just a weird, almost like a spiritual thing, I guess. I had just moved here where I live now, so away from my hometown for the first time ever. Was looking for jobs, was literally driving from an interview. And it was as if somebody was in the car. Like, mind you, I hadn't missed a period, hadn't felt any symptoms. But it was like somebody was in the car and said, stop by the store and pick up a pregnancy test.
Wow.
Just like, no, like, hey, might be pregnant. Like, we weren't trying. Worst time, I mean, timing was horrible considering I had just left my family and we were barely getting settled. But yeah, that was it. It was as if somebody told me. I went, sure enough, I was pregnant. From there, just life pieces kind of aligned and everything had worked out. But I'd say even from childhood, I always knew I wanted to be a mom. I knew I knew it was for me. I wasn't the kid thinking about, the marriage and, walking down the aisle. There was none of that. For me, I just always knew I was going to be a mom. So the pregnancy probably physically was rough. I had gestational diabetes and, my doctor, love her and absolutely appreciate it. But she kind of went to the extreme where all of my appointments, I was seeing a dietitian. I was getting 4D ultrasounds to make sure my daughter wasn't growing too quickly or too much, which is a concern with the gestational diabetes. There was another specialist that I was seeing. So every checkup I had, it was 4 total appointments, which again, I think if I didn't feel like this was for me and was built for me, and I just was so happy. Like the second I found out I was pregnant, that was it. Like there was nothing that was going to bring me down. I had horrible morning sickness, pretty much more than half the pregnancy, to the point where I couldn't even drink water. It would trigger the nausea, but still was the happiest I've ever been. Like I just was so excited to have this person inside of me and to know that I was making them. Was just amazing. But physically, not at all. With the diabetes, I was on insulin. So I was checking my blood, 4 or 5 times a day, poking myself. By the time my daughter was born, you could see all the dots on my head from the tests. My stomach had the spots where I was giving myself the insulin shots, but still, like, when I talk about it, sorry.
Did you ever, were you ever afraid of needles or anything like that?
No.
Is that easy for you to do?
I mean, I am kind of, I hate getting shots, going to the doctor, but it was, from pregnancy through birth, like even now, it's kind of this thing where I almost see it myself as 2 different people. So whatever I'm normally afraid of or whatever normally causes me pain, I'm immune to it with the kids. So I hate needles. I hate getting shots. But I was doing it every day because that's what I had to do, right? I wanted my baby to come out healthy and I didn't even think about it. I didn't even think about popping myself in the stomach every night with that insulin. And it really wasn't until sharing the story and having people see like, oh my gosh, like you have to do that it even registered in my brain, like, oh, I probably shouldn't be so happy, right? Something's off, but whatever. I was on top of the world. The birth was a surprise. She came a month and a half early. And there were, again, no complications. I had done everything to a T. I was at one of my final checkups. And the way I'd spaced out the appointments, because I'm greedy and I loved all of the 4D ultrasounds I got, I planned it so I did the ultrasound first and then go to my OB for my checkup and then the nutritionist, because by then it's lunchtime and I can go in to eat. So 7:00 in the morning, there I am getting my ultrasound. And I had known I had lower fluid throughout the pregnancy. That was one of the big things they were checking. And I had known I had leaked a little bit the weekend before. It was Monday morning. I didn't even have my husband come with me because I was like, we're having them so often. Like, I don't want to deal with it. I'll be in and out. Like, no big deal. We got over a month left.
Yeah.
Right. Doctor comes in, not even 2 minutes, and he's like, okay, back to the computer. Okay, so you're going to go to the hospital now and have your baby. And I was like, what? He's
That's
like, yeah,
so
just as
shocking.
calm as could be. Just, okay, it's time. He's like, your fluid's down to the point where it's not safe anymore. He said, so, just go casually. No big deal. I was like, they're waiting for me at work. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's so
but
early.
it was still, this moment where I know I should have, or not should have. Normally, I would have been freaking the freak out, right? I had nothing ready, didn't even have a bag ready. Like, we weren't even that far along. But I go home, I pack my bag, call my husband, I'm like, well, I guess we're having a baby today. Feel
As
like
nonchalantly
nothing.
as the doctor said to you.
And it just was a weird day. I tried to go to the hospital. It was too early. They normally take, non-emergencies, at the end of the night through ER. So I just waited around, almost went to work. I didn't. And just went to the hospital that night. They induced me, I want to say like 36 hours later of nothing. I was on full Pitocin or whatever it is that they give you. Mm-hmm. I was maxed out on everything. I could see on the monitor that I was having contractions. Didn't feel a thing. I just
you hadn't
was there.
Had any pain medication yet?
No.
And you didn't feel anything?
No.
Wow.
And they told me some of them were big. They'd come in and we'd see the thing, and I didn't know. Like, I thought that was maybe the baby's blood. I don't know. Mm-hmm. They were like, "Whoa, do you feel that one?" And I was like, "No, it feels like a little warm on my back, but nothing."
That's so interesting.
Yeah, it's weird. And from everything I had heard, when you're induced, it's all worse, right? Because it's not, your body naturally going through the process. But no, to this day, if it weren't for maybe separate conversation, a miscarriage that I had, I would not know what it feels like to have contractions and have the feeling of pushing. Mm-hmm. With my daughter, after about 36 hours, nothing, I wasn't progressing at all. I just thought, I just want her here. I didn't have my heart set on anything. I didn't have a birth plan because the way that I handle planning does not leave a lot of space for things to go wrong. And, with the birth of your child, we all know nothing goes according to plan. Birth through life, So I just thought, I'm not going to put that added stress on myself. I'm going to go with it. I'm going to trust these people. I loved my doctor. I loved the staff. We had gone to the hospital and met everyone. So I just kind of was going with it.
How did you have the wisdom to know that you can't control birth? Like you can't control life, really?
Life. I mean, I don't think it came from anything good, right? It came from a rough life of having a lifetime of expectations that are never met. Mm-hmm. And I think childhood stuff, obviously, of just knowing physically, like, I can only control my reaction to it. Mm-hmm. Like, literally, there's nothing else. I'm strapped to a bed. I have all of the things on me. My spouse at the time, was not necessarily somebody that I could go to for support. So I knew worst case scenario, like I'm going to have to take care of myself, because that's just how it's always been. Mm-hmm. So I think, going through it, there was no thought. It was just, I'm just going with it. And I have to trust them, right? I mean, they're professionals. Mm-hmm. I truly loved my doctor. She, at no point during the pregnancy did I feel that any of my questions were, annoying. If it took me 3 hours of asking questions, she was going to sit there with me, whether people were walking out of her office or not. And like, I've done that. Mm-hmm. I've been the annoyed one waiting for her to hurry up and finish so that my appointment can start. But when it's you, I appreciated it. Yeah. So I think if I didn't have that security going into it, would have been completely different.
Yeah. Having a trusted provider is everything.
Yes, yes. So by the time she came back, she was just like, hey, we need an honest conversation. Either we can keep at it. She's like, you can be here another day. She's like, the way that it's going, probably it'll be a few days before, but I can't let you leave. We're at the point where you're here until this baby's born. She's like, or we can have your baby in less than an hour. We can do a C-section. And again, for me, the goal was baby. I didn't care about anything else. I said, let's go, let's do it. And that was it. Didn't even think about it. The second she said, I'm like, okay, I'm ready. Because I couldn't sleep. Just because I didn't have the contractions and the pain and everything, it's still not a fun situation, and either way I knew I was going to have the wherewithal once the baby's born, right? Like I need to be rested. I need to be able to take care of her and get through the after. Mm-hmm. So I said, let's just do it. And we did it, not even 45 minutes later.
Like you do, like I know you do. All right, got to do this.
Yes. And it's really funny. Like, doctor fully supportive. She's like, I want you to have a healthy baby, and I want you to have a healthy experience. She's like, so whatever that looks like, you want to talk to your husband. My mom wasn't even there yet. Because it had taken so long, we were like, well, don't rush. It's, we're going to be here for a while.
San Diego, your mom?
Yeah. So she had come down. We checked in 7 at night. She had come down the next afternoon. And then a few hours. Oh no, she was on her way by the time I made the decision. So by the time Ari was out, my mom was already there. So she made it just in time. But the weird thing is the nurses. So, we've had the staff change by then. And there was like a light switch. The second I agreed to the C-section, the kindness that I was getting from the nurses disappeared. Like almost, you would think I like personally offended them. Only one of them had come out and said, I wish you would have waited a little bit longer. Natural is best.
Wow.
And I said, yes, surprised. Whatever, I could have waited. I could have not waited, I could have waited and then there could have been an emergency, but again, like it's my choice. This is me having a baby.
Yeah.
And I don't know, whatever.
That's not anyone's place to say anything except
I didn't entertain a long conversation with her. I just said, I'm ready. Why wait? I'm ready for it to happen. Mm-hmm. So that was the only weird thing, really. The whole experience was the shift in the treatment from not the doctors, but the support staff there in the hospital. But it was great. I mean, the only other thing that I made sure to change from one to the next was during recovery. They, for whatever reason, whether it was the hospital or what, I couldn't recover with my daughter. So they had sent me just to general surgery recovery area. So I'm there with everyone that's just had surgeries.
This is for your first pregnancy?
Yeah. So it was from C-section to the time I saw her again, almost 2 hours in between her being with me.
What was that like for you, being separated after having just waited so long to meet her and really enjoying having her? So
at first I was almost like in shock, right? Just of everything that had happened. Like it didn't even sink in until they were bringing her to the room. And then it just was like, and then that's when I saw my mom. So it just like was a triple wave of emotion and like literally just sobbed. The second I saw her and the second I saw my mom there, even though, the relationship is an odd one, but just having both of them there at the same time when I was coming out of it was like, I can't even describe. It just was a crazy wave of emotions. But that was it. I mean, I couldn't have asked for, better recovery situation. I have a high tolerance for pain, so, it was fine. My mom was there with us, the whole time. I want to say for almost a month after she was born. So we had someone there.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, we got really lucky.
Did you get to stay with your daughter after that? Like,
yes.
Okay.
So they were not allowed to take her again. And she needed to go away for a little bit. I think they took her because she was so early. They took her up to the NICU just to make sure that her lungs and everything were fully developed. So that was part of it that I wasn't aware of until afterwards. But yeah, it was, and I bring that up because I could tell the difference between my daughter and my son. Where my son, there was no separation. He was with me the whole time, still C-section, and just California, they're now starting to do more VBACs, but it wasn't so much a thing 8-9 years ago. So with my son, I had him immediately. Like, he did not leave the room with me, from me. And I still see it. I mean, where he's about to be 9, and I can see where the emotional connection is different than it was with my daughter. Even like breastfeeding was harder. And he was also in the NICU because he came early. And still they made sure that we got skin to skin right away. And again, I'm sure there's a million factors in, how our relationships with our kids develop. But I would say that's the biggest difference is those early years, because it did change that connection in the very beginning, where she had a little harder time connecting with me than he did. So definitely, that's the only thing I would change really from one to the next.
Being able to have that time together. Yeah.
Yes.
I can't imagine going through that. Like, that would be so scary. And to not know why she's being taken away.
Yeah.
And telling you and asking you if it's okay to do that. That's like traumatic. Do you feel like it's traumatic, or it may have been for Ari at the time?
I think it was. And I think a bigger part of it is just not having that communication, because it's also like psychologically a weird thing, right? Like, I just had a baby and there was a guy next to me that just had knee surgery.
Yeah.
Like it was this like weird disconnect of like, my life just changed in like the most, magnificent way. And I'm here with just like in the corner of a room with random people. So it definitely, I don't know, it kind of put a damper on the excitement, right? Because, you just want to be with your baby and you just had this big thing. And so definitely, not an ideal situation.
Yeah.
But, I'm careful not to complain too much because it could have been worse, So many things could go wrong, in the grand scheme of things. It was a pretty good birth experience.
I think you're allowed to complain and also be grateful for things. That's my whole spiel that I say a lot.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, but I'm sorry that you didn't get to see her right then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was weird. It was weird on so many levels.
Yeah.
I think the disconnect of not having her right away. But also, I think it just the whole moment of when I did see her and having my mom and like this weird thing of Ari still to this day looks exactly like me. So from day one has looked like her mom, at that age. So it was this really weird thing of like looking down and seeing myself. Like literally, like my mom brought my newborn pictures from the hospital and it's the exact same face. Wow. So it was like this really weird, it messed me up, of like, this is my introduction to my child, right? But then here's my mom who I also look exactly like. So it was like the 3-generation thing was, it would have been nice if I just had Ari, and like had some time with her, instead of having this big weird thing. But the second like she was in my arms, that was it. Like I knew.
What do you think would have been different if you just saw Ari?
I think I would have been able to just take in the moment of like, this is my daughter. This is the thing that I just went through. This whole 9-month experience, like, has been leading up to this thing. And it would have been nice just to have a moment with her of like a little introduction, I guess, Yeah. But to not have, it would have been nice to just have that, just her and I, or even like with Juan there, her dad. I think that would have been nicer than having someone else there, especially because of, I have issues with my mom. So, while it was nice to have her there, I'm not used to having her in my big emotional moments. So there was no full processing for me because now I'm processing this thing and having to be on, right? And, still host people in my room, even though my insides are still coming out.
I wonder too if there's more to process if there's a disconnect from like your birth and then seeing your baby, like, when you are handed your baby right as they come out of your body, there's more of a connection of like, this came from my body. And I just imagine there's more of a disconnect there that you have to process on top of processing becoming a parent.
Right.
So,
because it was, they took her out and they took her to where they needed to, but it was like, this life has just come out of you, but you don't get it, so there was no celebration really in that moment, so just having it delayed and then however long it's delayed, whether it was an hour or it could have been shorter or longer, it's still never going to be the same as that first instant when you're there on the table, and they're just born. So that definitely, considering like I wanted everything natural, I wanted to experience all of the things, however horrible they were, I wanted to experience them. So again, like it's just, that was the one thing that I knew that I wanted and is the one thing I didn't get, so it was again of just, being emotionally prepared. And for me, still the number one was that I had a healthy baby and that I survived and had a healthy, birth, and everything else would have just been extra.
Did you feel like you were able to process that grief at the time? Or
no, I hadn't even thought about it until we started talking about this.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, here? Like now?
Because so much of my life has been autopilot. Like I'm not dealing with emotions in the moment. Like that's still not necessarily a luxury that I feel that I have.
It's a privilege.
Yes. Yeah. So it really wasn't. I think I made the comment of like, I'm afraid to look back on like with today's eyes, what I know now. And that's why I say, like, I see the difference. Like, there's a different emotional connection that I have with my son that I don't have with my daughter, and yes, I was a different person, right? There's an 8-year gap in between them. So I was, yes, much more mature and had the experience, of raising my daughter for the most part. But I still look back on, those first few hours of like that kind of set the foundation. That was the introduction. That was our introduction to each other. And it was people keeping us apart.
Yeah. Other people.
Which is crazy.
Touching her, doing stuff to
and
her.
Not telling you. Yeah.
Right.
And not telling you what's happening is
violence.
Confusing, surprising.
Yes.
Yeah.
So with my son, he did not leave the room unless I knew who was taking him, how long he was going to be gone, and what exactly they were doing, which then came in handy because then there was a whole fight there with circumcision. They wanted to circumcise him, and to the point where I had to take him out of someone's arms before they discharged me, because, oh, well, there's just one more thing that hasn't been done. By this point, I had written on the board. I removed my pain tolerance thing and said no circumcision. I put a note on his little bassinet. And again, they didn't want to tell me what they were doing.
Wow.
So every time someone came in, the first thing out of my mouth was, no circumcision. We do not consent.
Mm-hmm. And then you still found yourself in a situation where you were pulling him away from people.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is happening in Southern California in the year, when was he born?
In 2015.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
It shouldn't take that much effort on your part.
Yeah.
No.
Wow.
Well, and the fact that that doctor wouldn't even do, I wanted to get my tubes tied. But in that appointment, my husband at the time hesitated. So she refused to tie my tubes as part of my C-section. Because, well, your husband might want another baby.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just ignoring over and over again your autonomy and dignity as a woman and person.
I just got hot.
Yeah.
That's just so. Ugh.
And it's a shame, like in every other sense, loved the doctor. This one more so than the first doctor. So I thought, like, I hit the jackpot, right? You hear horror stories from pregnant people or just women in general. But, I thought I was so lucky with this doctor. Like, felt amazing. All of my questions, everything was great up until that last appointment. And it was like, well, your husband might want another baby. I'm like, well, it's not his body.
Yeah, not his decision. Wow, there's just so many things that happened that I want to further process with you. Can we go back to Ari and just that separation? And I'm thinking about if that would happen to me with Ruby, that I would want to somehow try to compensate for that loss, or that disconnect, or not being able to be there somehow, even though it wasn't on you. You would have done everything. Do you find that you're trying that with Ari over the 16 years?
Absolutely. Why are you calling me out?
I just know what I would do, and we have similar natures,
So, I never thought about that. Yes, absolutely. But also a combination of always feeling this strong connection to motherhood, right? I am obsessed with my kids, obsessed, and with Ari, I know part of it, oh man, I never thought about that.
Well, you don't have to fully think about it right now.
No, it totally is. I want to know everything. I'm tracking her on multiple devices, different accounts on things. It's part of why, we're since separated. I'm not with their dad anymore. But part of why, the changes that I made when we did separate, of making sure that I'm there for them, 100% when they're with me, down to I need to know everything about school. I need to know everything about the friends. I know part of it was just my obsessive personality and just wanting to know everything about them because they're amazing. I made them. How cool is that, right?
It's really cool.
Yeah, but it totally is. I never made that freaking connection, but I do always feel like I need to overcompensate with her, and I just chalked it up to teenage girl, right? There's so much more work that we have to do with her to make sure she protects herself and, all of that I never considered, but it has been. It feels like I'm going through, always working up to something and not fully achieving it. Even though like I do, like our relationship is amazing. You know, it's better than like I've never, you know, not to toot my own horn, but I've never met anyone with like at the 16-year-old.
It's true.
You know, with,
well, just the fact that she at like 14, 13 wanted to come on a trip with you to come up to visit us, and just observing how you two interacted. She trusts you a lot. It's almost like this, a mother-daughter relationship that I would look up to, that I want to have with Ruby.
Oh, that's so
yeah,
nice.
it's like it's been hard, right? It's hard work, but I do. Some of it is me definitely trying to make up for something.
Yeah.
Probably, you know, that is part of it, I'm sure. But it's, I do feel that, like, I feel like there's a way that we're never going to be connected, and I don't know how to fix that. And I don't know that she even feels it. Like, it's probably all in my imagination.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do feel that I have to do more emotionally, you know, to have a connection with her than I do with Augie.
I'm sure. Well, I wonder what she would say if you told her these things, and someday maybe if she would like unburden you from that needing to repair that.
Well, I know, like, we talk all the time, you know, so I know that she doesn't feel it.
Yeah.
You know, and like I've never made that connection, but I've had the conversations with her again because of my relationship with my mom. You know, and I've been fully transparent with her of, you know, I can see where these bad decisions I made, you know, I can see what voids I was trying to fill, you know, and I've been open with her of that. My goal in parenting is not, you know, these accolades, like, yeah, finish school. Like, I'm not looking for straight A's. I'm not looking for you to become a millionaire. Like, for me, my job is to make sure that emotionally and psychologically they're where they need to be, so that then they can achieve whatever it is they want. You know, and my conversations with her are, I was not able to have conversations with anyone in my family. You know, if something good happened, there was always going to be somebody there to squash it, you know, to, you know, put a rain on the parade. You know, if something bad happened, there was always going to be something negative of like, oh, you deserved it. Or, you know, these bad things, right? Bad things are what you should be expecting, you know, so I'm open with her in that of like, there is never going to be anything that we cannot discuss. I'm allowed to have feelings, right? You know, I'm allowed to react just like you're allowed to have feelings and react. But that doesn't mean that this is not a safe space, you know? So I have those conversations with her. And again, like I never knew, like nobody told me or taught me how to parent. I mean, nobody knows, right? Like none of us. We can go to school and do the things and it's still not experiencing it.
Yeah. That's truly amazing, though, the way that you're able to communicate with each other. It just has me wondering if, like, what you're feeling of, like, the disconnect is simply just mom guilt of...
Oh, totally.
And really, you've made that repair. I mean, it sounds to me like you've done everything to make your communication, to put you in a good place as far as being connected, so...
Yeah, but that mom guilt still,
it's so
there.
strong.
It festers. Yeah. It's like, are you a parent if you don't have guilt?
Yeah.
Which one? Are they mutually exclusive? Or
I'm like, it's okay. Like you can have a snooty attitude if you've had a bad day, but then it's still always like, what did I do? Did I not say I love you this morning? You know, like it's this crazy thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I try not to sit and reflect and think of like, oh, how did that thing, you know, mess up or, you know, have a negative impact on things. Cause then, you know, you just fall down the rabbit hole and you go to all the mistakes.
Yeah. Well, it also like it takes so much dedication and patience and personal work to break those generational patterns that you talk about, learning from how you grew up and then trying to do something different with your kids. It's admirable and a lot of work.
It's not easy.
It sucks.
Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah.
To have, because you have your own resentment and rage and feelings about it.
And then you resent your kids, right? Because now, and it is like, she's my size. Like, we look eye to eye, and it's like looking in a mirror.
You have to send a photo
you get the attitude.
so Jordan can see the two of you when she was really, really young. And even now, I can show you on Instagram too.
Yeah, it's kind of freaky. Yeah. It's super freaky. Because it is, it's the way she speaks, it's her mannerisms, and it's the attitude, and it's really hard because it's every second of every day, you have to be on guard, in a way of knowing the attitude is not addressed to me. It's not a reaction to me. I didn't mess up. She's just in a bad mood, right? Like, we all have bad days, like at the end of the day, at the end of school, it's not always going to be excitement, but it's exhausting, because it's literally every interaction, and I'm reliving it. I'm like, oh my gosh, well, how could I should have said this instead, or I should have, it's so much work.
It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
I mean, I know Sophie and I are both very we have a lot of empathy and can feel what other people around us are feeling. And so I resonate with that a lot. And I'm not a parent. So, but I can fully imagine what it's like to deal with that on a daily basis, because I do with other relationships in my life, and kids are a whole other.
And it's everyone, it's not just the kids, it's everyone that you're interacting with. We have no idea what anyone's going through.
Yeah. I'm curious what it was like having your mom there for a month after going home.
I just couldn't imagine
with everything that you've said.
And in a 1-bedroom apartment.
I don't know how you did it.
That we weren't even, like I said, we had just moved there. We were renting from someone, so we didn't even have furniture. We bought a couch when the week Ari was born, just so my mom could have somewhere to sleep. It was surprisingly easy. So if there's one thing, my mom and my family is really good at, it's
showing up, being
physically present. We're not having the emotional conversations, right? There's none of that, but there's one thing is she knows how to be there. So I had that whole month of just my daughter and I, my mom, I took naps, there was never a, I can't take a shower because the baby, my mom was there.
So it gave you the space to have that connection and not have to worry about anything else.
Yes. And it was like she, like I said, it was a 1-bedroom apartment. There was nowhere for her to hide. But she would sit in a corner of the room, just so that we could be there, so that I could have time with her, whether I was feeding her or whatever. So that's one thing where she's really good. And, I had mom's home cooking for a month. So that was amazing. But it was nice. I mean, there were no heartfelt conversations, but that's the way that, she shows up, and I appreciated it.
On the one hand, it's so important to get that support during postpartum, the meals and help, just the help, but then no one prepares you at all for how you think about your mom, and especially after having just given birth and all the hormones, and comparing yourself for what you're doing and then thinking about how you were parented. It's such a trippy experience. And then to be in your bedroom and then walk out and your mom's there and you're thinking about so many things or feeling so many things, and then to not talk about it must have been so bizarre.
And it's even, more messed up, right? Because you look at, and again, for me, motherhood was what changed everything. That not indirectly, but unknowingly, that's what started my healing of, with everything, with my family, just in general. But it was also this like weird situation of having a kid that's my clone, basically, and looking down and knowing I didn't feel the love, right? Growing up, like I never felt that emotional connection with my family. And now having this little me and thinking, how could you not?
Yeah.
So like on one hand, it was amazing, right? For my mom to be there and, support the way that she could. But then it was also like a really confusing time of, I understand their circumstances, they had just immigrated, my siblings, all of that, but it's still, and it's something that I'm obviously still dealing with of every time I look at her, I'm like, well, how can you not just want to shower your kid in love, dude? Like, so it's a really messed up thing and almost a curse, right? Because I have this self-awareness and this empathy of, for everyone, everyone's situation, and knowing, we all do the best that we can with what we have, right? But it's still, it was amazing to have that support, but it also was very painful, still of just like, it's the three of us in a room, in a tiny apartment all day. So it was really confusing to feel taken care of, but also not.
In the way that you needed.
Yeah. And then also like just not understanding. Like I have this person here, I cannot imagine me ever not wanting to hear everything that she has to say, and to be there. So it was confusing,
yeah.
Where I know you love me and you're telling me that you love me and you're showing me love, but there's a disconnect with that definition of love. And now what I'm experiencing, this new love that for me, it's like the first time I've ever experienced love. Like I never knew what it was like to have those feelings, and having them for my daughter, like it was such a confusing time. So I just ignored all of that.
What did you think when she left, like after a month?
I was relieved. Again, like there was no emotional stuff going on. So for me, I was just relieved to have the space, because I still, even though like she was really good at staying away and like giving me my space and not like, oh, you're doing that wrong or do it this way. It's still, you feel somebody there, like watching you. So it wasn't until she left that I really felt that like, oh, I'm a mom. Now my mom's not here to take care of me. Like now for real, I'm a mom. It's just me. So our first full day, like Juan was already back at work. So when my mom left, it was just Ari and I. And it was the best. Like I loved it. Like I'm the weirdo that loves the newborn stage. I didn't care that I wasn't getting any sleep. Like I was obsessed with this little tiny person.
I'm calling you to come help me with the second one. You can help me.
Like I literally would just sit there and stare at her. Yeah. Like it didn't matter, like middle of the night, like eyes burning. Like I just was so obsessed with her. So again, like I felt like all of those really, really good feelings, just how happy I was that she was there. It was all delayed because I didn't have that emotional connection with my mom. And I mean, obviously with my husband at the time, we're not together anymore, but to not have the space, not feeling like I had the space to have any of the emotions, I didn't feel it until it was just Ari and I, and then it blew up. Right. But everything was just delayed.
Yeah. So it's really not just those 2 hours. It's like after a full month.
Yeah. And it was like their dad's family is so big and so social. Like there were so many people in the hospital room and there were like nonstop guests that it was like, there just was no time for any of it to fully sink in, because you're in it, you're doing it, you're, taking care of a human. there was no time to slow down. And again, I'm, that hyper independent person that like no one was going to help me. Like my husband didn't do anything right. Like it all had to be my way, because we know the best.
Yeah.
So it was just, it was just running from day one, just busy.
Yeah.
Which I think for me and my emotional capacity was probably best case scenario.
Yeah. I mean, you really don't have the time to process a lot of the things that come up.
Yeah.
Especially in the early days.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She's almost considered an adult soon. How do you feel about that?
It's so hard.
Not a question you want to answer.
I don't even know how I feel about it. It's bizarre. We're having, these big conversations now, and it's just weird. Like it's just now hitting me, that we're moving out of like kid anything, even though like she still loves like little kid stuff, whatever. But it is weird. Like she's looking for jobs now. I think she went this weekend to open her first bank account. She wants to start driving. It's unlocking fears that I knew I had, that I just thought I had more time before I had to deal with. So like even for me, like the driving is a big one. I am, I'm just terrified. And I've told her, like, it's not that I don't trust you. Mm-hmm. I mean, one, like, I don't think your response times are fast enough. Like, if a car's coming, you got 3 seconds, like there's no, my kids have had, a blessed life. They have not had to learn to react quickly to things. But the other thing is like, there's so many things that could go wrong. Mm-hmm. And I can't be there, right, to fix it. I can't be there to protect you. Mm-hmm. I can be there as quickly as I can, and I will, no matter what. But it's freaking terrifying.
It's another huge transition.
Yes.
The
and it's like the emotional
being created between you now in a different way.
Yeah, I don't want to think about that.
You've got time.
Yeah. I think the worst part is the friends, is, her interpersonal relationships. Mm-hmm. And that, again, it's that emotional piece where, like, sometimes because we have our way of communicating, sometimes my initial reaction is not what she wants, right? Like she wants, just comfort and somebody to say it's going to be okay. And sometimes I don't know, like I feel like I'm on a delay, again, just my own personal life stuff. But I do always make it a point to go back and say, hey, I reacted this way because I didn't know what to do. Like, I don't know. I'm just like when there's been a few times like she's come crying about things with her friends, and
she comes to you. That's like so big.
Yes.
That's huge. And so it's also huge for you to go back and talk about it. It's huge.
Yeah. And it's painful.
Yeah.
Because I don't want anyone to hurt my baby. Yeah. And it's hard. It's literally the hardest thing is those interpersonal relationships
that you have no control over.
Yes, but I take comfort, and I've told her, like, hey, you're different. I know that I'm choosing to the way that I treat them is not like most parents, especially not here where we live. I don't know how much Sophie has told you how conservative it is here. My parenting is completely different than anyone else.
That's very brave.
Well, I have to.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the only way to make sure that I can build, whatever connections I need with them. And so she does. She tells me about everything, not always, right when it happens, but she does always come to me just to kind of bounce things off of. But it's hard, it's amazing. And, I know how blessed I am that the things have worked, right? Because I could have done all of the things and she still could have done she could have reacted a million different ways, so it's, on one hand, it's amazing to know that she does feel this connection. Like just this past weekend, she was joking. We ran into some of her friends at Target and she's like, well, I don't want them to see how you talk to me or how we talk to each other. And I was like, why? That's weird. She's like, because I talk to you like normal, like I talk to everyone else. And like, it didn't register in my brain. I was like, well, what are you talking about? I was like, well, how do your friends talk to their parents?
Wow. And
that's when she was like, they're not themselves. She said, they're
who their parents want them to be.
Exactly. And I was like, oh, that's like awesome, but also like terrifying because now there's pressure.
There's pressure, but you literally are getting proof that she talks to you the same way she talks to other people, because parents don't necessarily get that proof.
Right.
You just hope that they're being open with you, and she's
just
open about that. That's
I
mean, that's huge. That's so cool.
Yeah, like she's come to me with like sex questions already and like relationships. Like she's
come to you? That's amazing.
Like she initiates. Like, and the big one is, and where, I do take, out, this is, I absolutely will brag about my relationship with my kids, like that, because I've worked so hard at it. But even to the point where she's like, Mom, how come all of my friends, like, they're all just dying for relationships? Like everyone's like starved for a boyfriend and, they're having sex already. And she's like, what's wrong with me that I don't, I'm not in a rush for that. And, we both just sat there and thought about it. I was like, I don't know, like, hold up. Like, I don't want to answer that and just, verbal diarrhea. Like, I have to be careful with this, right?
That's a big question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it sunk in and I told her, I said, you've never felt the need to be anything other than yourself. Like from day one, all of the really weird, random things that you were into, like, we embraced them 100%. Like, I didn't care how inconvenient it was. I said, every, little fashion choice you had, I said, we supported it. I was always afraid, right, that there was going to be bullying because, like, she went through some crazy stages, where I was afraid, like, oh my gosh, people are going to stare at her. People are going to, do all of these things. She wanted her head shaved like really early and, and we fully embraced it all. And again, like it was this thing of not fully knowing what we were doing. I knew that I just wanted to support whatever they wanted. You want to dance? Okay, we're going to go dance. We're going to get some dance classes. We're going to do all of the things. So now like I'm finally getting to the point, at 16 years old, but now I'm getting to the point where I'm like, oh, it's because that we let you be yourself. You're not, how did I explain it? I said, you don't find, but your value is you determine it. We're not raised in a way to find your value in anyone else's opinion, but now that's triggering like this other weird place that I never thought I'd be of like, almost wanting, there's days where sometimes I wish she was like everyone else because then her life would be easier.
Then she won't feel like there's something wrong with her, but there isn't. She has you've given her something that people put their kids into therapy for. Like
self-awareness where you don't have to like seek out relationships to make you feel
the
whole
void,
like most teenagers do.
Right.
That's, oh wow.
So
it's like not something I ever thought was possible.
Right?
But now I'm like, oh man, but she's also kind of suffering sometimes because of it.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. Like it was this thing, right, that I thought, shoot for the stars or whatever that saying is, and I did the thing. And now I'm like, oh, I didn't consider these other ways where maybe being that way would make life challenging for her. So now we're having those conversations.
Mm-hmm. I do think that that is like a very unique to childhood challenge. I think that she's so close to adulthood where being different doesn't make you stand out quite so much. Like you can find your own life and your own path in adulthood that you just don't have the space for when you're still in school.
Right.
So I feel like she's just got to hang on a little bit longer because these are all of these, the self-awareness is going to benefit her in a huge way.
I'm so excited, right, to see her as an adult, and selfishly, it's, I'm seeing the potential of what I could have been, right? Like, so it's like this clusterfuck of like, so this thing I wanted it so bad and I have it, right? I've achieved this thing and my kids are good. They're still going to need therapy because everyone should be in therapy, right? Like, I don't think anything would eliminate that, but I've told her flat out, I'm trying to eliminate the things that you're working on in therapy. Yeah. So if I can give you less work to do, then maybe you won't have to spend so much time, but it is, I do feel selfish sometimes, like when I sit and think about it, because it is it's like a healing for myself of seeing like, oh, I could have been XYZ, this life thing could have been easier for me had these things in my early childhood been different, so it's amazing and I love it, but it's also so painful.
Yeah.
And so triggering all the time.
Yeah. I never thought that there would be cons to unconditional love or acceptance in a parent-child relationship, but this has given me a new thing to think about.
Yeah. They're so complex. Do you think this all would have gone very differently if your first child wasn't a girl?
Oh.
Who looks just like you too.
Just for the fact of like you seeing yourself.
Yes. Because I the fact that she looks like me is such a huge part of it. And I hate, I don't want to be selfish, right? Like I would have loved her unconditionally no matter what. I think the looking like me, it's just added a different layer, where I know the consequences of continuing the cycle. So it wasn't so much, I didn't know what I was shooting for. I just knew what I was trying to avoid, so from day one, there was the reminder of, I'm not gonna be responsible for you feeling the way that I've ever felt. So if I would have had my son first, I'm sure it would have been different. I think I would have parented them both differently because I wouldn't have had that mirror, from day one. And there isn't a day that goes by that I don't spend a moment looking at her and just reminding myself of like, oh, that's me. It's not, but it is, but it's not.
It's trippy. Yeah, our kids are mirrors, but she's extra shiny for you.
Yeah, it is. Like, it's her facial expressions, it's the way her attitude, the way that she uses it, it's weird. There's times where she'll get snippy with me and I like physically recoil as if she's slapped me, because it's like, oh, that's what it's like. That's what it's like for people that are dealing with me. I'm like, oh, I should not do that anymore.
Yeah.
Holding that mirror right up to your face.
Yeah. Teaching you the impact that you have on others. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm curious, you talked earlier about how you felt more you feel more emotionally connected to your son.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk a little bit about how your relationship with him is different from what you've been describing with your daughter?
So it's almost like he and I are synced. So where my daughter is exactly like me, even emotionally, where she's on her own. Like she self-soothes more than he does. He needs me to soothe. Where even if she like bumps her leg, if she like bumps herself, like she doesn't want anyone around her, like because she doesn't even want to come close to somebody touching her, and while she's dealing with whatever she's feeling. Where with my son, he needs me. He, regardless of us being with the whole extended family or with his dad, the first person that he goes to is me. Where my daughter is good on her own, she comes to me afterwards, kind of like to decompress. Where he wants the immediate emotional support, and then he's done. Mm-hmm. And even like from when she was younger, like she was on her own. Like I did co-sleeping with both of them. I still co-sleep with him. By the time she was 2, she was like, I want my own room. Like she didn't just want out of the bed. She wanted her own space. So she, totally independent from the beginning, where I had to like beg her for time, or, literally we'll have to ask for a hug. And with my son, it's just, he's all emotion all the time. Everything else, he's fine. He can take care of himself, where she's completely independent emotionally, but she needs everything else.
I wonder if that's also somehow connected to the early birth.
I had that
story.
same thought. Like, I wonder how much, like the moments after birth affect your brain. Is that what you're thinking? Yeah.
But
like
I think it's so much more too. So remember, it took me 6 years to have him, and he's my rainbow baby. Mm-hmm. So before I had him, I would say maybe 6 months before I got pregnant with him, I had miscarried. So then there was so much more with him, mm-hmm. where even from, I would take it back to conception, where she was not planned, right? She was this glorious surprise that we had. And my son, was 6-7 years in the making of wanting a child. And almost broke up our marriage, of this, secondary infertility that I had. And then to have the miscarriage right before, I think all of that, obviously, yes, the initial birth experience, but I think there was just so much more also with my son.
Yeah, it's very different situations.
Yeah.
And you're a different person, mm-hmm. and your marriage is in a different place.
Right.
So many things change. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to speak to that at all, about what that was like going through those 6-7 years of
fertility struggles?
Yeah. You don't have to,
No, I don't mind.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't think about it often. Mm-hmm. It's a weird thing, right? To have secondary, to have a baby and then experience infertility. And I was just stubborn. And because I wanted everything natural with my daughter, I just wanted to experience the things, right? I kind of had this attitude when I was trying to get pregnant with my son of I don't want any intervention. It has to be natural. If it's meant to be, it will be this way. If not, then that's fine. And I was happy just having one. I didn't need to have another one. Their dad really wanted at least one other child. And, I didn't feel strongly either way. So I was like, okay, let's do it.
Are you speaking about natural conception, not getting help with fertility?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I didn't want any fertility help. Mm-hmm. I wanted it. I just convinced myself that, I didn't know if I even wanted another one. Right. I had this thing with my daughter, and having my daughter, I already knew maybe the marriage wasn't going to last. So there was just so much pressure to have a baby. He didn't really want us to do any interventions also. He wanted to go natural, which I was fine with. Because in my mind, I was like, if it happens, great. If not, fine. No pressure. But I want to say maybe 5 years in, I really, really started wanting another one. And then we started considering going. So I just started the conversation with my doctors. They put me on metformin when I first got pregnant. Just by chance, it was, because my doctor was really good with, understanding, like, I would love it, if it happened naturally. Like, also, we don't have the money to spend thousands of dollars on, infertility, anything. My insurance didn't cover fully. So I just thought, like, we don't have the money to put up front. So that would be silly, right? To put ourselves in debt for, a child that now we're going to be struggling even more to raise because we're going to have this debt just so that we can have the baby. So I was like, okay, metformin, it's fine. We can try it. If not, again, no big deal. And I think right away I got pregnant. But I think, again, with the spiritual thing that I have with pregnancy, I knew the second I was pregnant before I even tested. But the second I found out I was pregnant, I already knew that baby was not going to be mine. I can't describe, like, I just knew, it wasn't my baby. So I was still excited, right? I still wanted to experience whatever was going to happen. We didn't really tell too many people. Like, I told people at work, and my family, our families. And I want to say it was just under 10 weeks where they finally were like, well, the womb is developing, but there's no embryo. And it was the same doctor that delivered my son. And she, was great about it. She said, we didn't do anything at first. She wanted me to at least start spotting before she prescribed anything. I ended up just giving birth to my empty womb, which was not something I was ever told was a possibility. So total surprise when, middle of the night, I wake up with contractions. My water had broken. I didn't know there was anything. So I gave birth to my empty womb in the shower at like 3:00 in the morning. But I still, again, because I didn't have this emotional connection to it, I don't know, it was painful, right? Physically painful. That's the only time I would say I felt contractions and felt what it's like, even remotely. But it was also, I don't know, it was also kind of beautiful. I don't know why, but just, knowing I was right, the intuition, whatever it was, whether it's, the ancestors telling me something, it was like this full circle moment of, this thing that we wanted so bad, but also, I knew deep down probably wasn't the best timing. Like, I shouldn't be stressed going into getting pregnant. We shouldn't have pressure to get pregnant or, to have kids or any of that, so that wasn't necessarily a good introduction, right, to the whole process. But it was soon after that, I want to say I just had to wait a cycle, and then I can't think of the medication they gave me. It was a shot to make me ovulate, whatever that one is.
I don't know it.
We can also look it up afterwards.
Yeah, it's driving me nuts. But so I had to do it. And same thing. Doctor said
I can
it
look it
never
up too.
happens in the first cycle. Clomid. Okay.
Clomid.
Clomid.
Medication is used to treat infertility in women, stimulating an increase in the amount of hormones.
Yes. And that, I would say, still changed my life. So we did one cycle. She said, no one ever gets pregnant in one cycle. Don't even get your hopes up. Plan for at least 4 cycles. So I was like, fine, no big deal. Same, like, kind of weird thing, like with my daughter, just kind of morbid. Someone in the family was in their final days from, I want to say, lung cancer. So we had all gone to the hospital to say our goodbyes, right? So we're there, this person, we don't know how much longer. And it was like somebody was standing in front of me and said, "You're pregnant." It worked. And it was really weird. And we left the hospital like after he had passed. And I turned to my husband and I said, "I think I'm pregnant." But again, like, because the doctor was like, "No, there's no way. Like, no one ever gets pregnant the first round, maybe the second." But she was like, "I've never seen anyone." And sure enough, like, we went home, got a test, and I was pregnant. Wow. She couldn't believe it. And that another one was where immediately I was like, okay, this is my son. Like, I knew it was a boy. I knew he was there to stay. But it was much more intense. My feelings for him, or for the idea of him, right? Because it was so early.
And experienced a loss too. That, would you say that there was something right about it when you said gave birth to the empty womb? Do you mean like an egg that's empty, or what do you mean by that?
So the egg was fertilized but never implanted.
Ah, okay.
But my womb was still progressing as if there was a baby.
Everything in the womb.
Yeah.
I see. Got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had the thought in the moment when you were talking about being alone in the middle of the night, going through your miscarriage, wondering if, like, as scary as it is to think about doing something like that alone, I had the thought of, like, you not getting a chance to be alone with your daughter and, like, process that, and how your feelings afterwards is that if you had that chance, you could have processed it more. So then when you were talking about being alone in the middle of the night going through your miscarriage, I almost was thinking you had that opportunity to like be in it on your own and like be processing through it, rather than like dealing with any external factors or people. And
my husband did come in. Like, okay. I asked him to come in. I woke him up eventually, really just to bring my phone, so I had music. Oh. And he offered to stay in there with me, but I don't know. I just felt like I thought it was a really beautiful moment, because I had wanted it with my daughter. I wanted to experience giving birth. Not that I think C-section is like, it's all giving birth. Like, I don't think one's better. I'm just selfish, and I just wanted to know what it felt like.
It's not selfish. It's just there's something redemptive about that too. Like, no matter how hard it was, you were in control of what was happening to you, and it's moving through your body.
Right. And I like knowing like how things work. So that's why, like, the medication, the Clomid, I say changed my life, because still to this day, it's intense. So I don't know if you guys have had the pleasure. It puts your cycle on like steroids. So that was the first time I realized, I feel every time I ovulate. I just didn't know that that's what it was. So I feel every step of my cycle. So I know now, even now, he's going to be 9 in 2 weeks, 9 years later, like, I can still feel everything now, because I'm aware of it. because of the medication, and we were like on a strict schedule, and she had told me all of the steps. So it's like crazy fascinating also of these processes that are happening in our bodies that we're not aware of. Like we just feel the inconvenience, right? We feel the little pain, the cramp, but it's like changed the way like I see it all. So like now when I'm cramping, I'm like, oh, okay, that's this kind of cramp. That's, you know, so it's this crazy thing, but yeah, it just was so much.
It's
like with
wild.
the miscarriage and with my daughter, and then it was a lot.
Yeah.
What was the pregnancy with Augie like?
So much easier. I didn't have gestational diabetes. I think that was the big one for me.
And at what point in your pregnancy with Ari did you get diagnosed with that?
Early on.
So how many? So at what? How many weeks?
What I would say either by the second or third appointment.
Maybe like 15 weeks. Is that too early?
No.
20 weeks?
One of the early blood tests, whenever they did that.
Might be pretty early. I'm just imagining having to give yourself shots for so many months. That's just such an added stress.
Yeah, I just was a thing that I had to do, you know, but it was weird. Like it didn't hit me into the end. Like all of my fingertips, it was just, they were all full of red dots from all of the testing, because I had to poke myself up 4 or 5 times a day, before and after every meal. So 9 months of that, it just looked like my fingers had polka dots all over them.
Yeah. And so you don't actually know a pregnancy to full term that isn't poking yourself.
Well, with Augie, I didn't have it.
Well, that's what I mean. Like with Augie, it was different. You didn't have that was your first
at all. Yeah.
Pregnancy. So having Augie and not having that must have been very different.
Oh yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah.
It was like I know, sorry. I know.
No, it was probably much better for you.
Yeah, it was the best. I think with Augie, then I got to experience the things that happen right when your body already knows. You know, so the pains were different. So there were a lot more questions. I'd say by like the 4th month, or maybe right before, my hips were just so uncomfortable. And that was like the big conversation with my doctor pretty much through the end. And she was just like, your body already knows what to expect. So your hips are already expanding.
Wow.
So your body's already getting ready. You know, I'm like, but it hurts, you know, so bad. And it's just different. I'd say it was so much easier. You know, I still had the nausea, but, you know, I already had my little plan. I knew what foods to avoid, you know, what foods I hated throwing up, because that's how I had to plan my meals, because I knew eventually I'd be throwing up.
Throw up.
Yeah, so I know don't eat eggs if you think.
Oh, God, yeah, you're right. That's pretty bad.
Yeah. That was the biggest, the hardest lesson with that.
Or like yogurt.
Yes. Yeah. And anything milky or creamy is not. So, you know, I limited my diet already with my son, just knowing how it was with Ari. So, yeah, it was so much easier. Harder, right? Because I had Ari to take care of, and she needed attention, and she was, 2? So, you know, she was doing all the things and needed somebody to play with, and, you know, we were busy.
Wait,
but it was so much better.
When you had Augie? No, I thought she was 8.
Oh, no, she was 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, just kidding. It's still when I got pregnant. Yeah. So she was in school by then. So it was, you know, we had our full routine. But yeah, it was way better. Also way harder in different ways. But yeah, it was so much better.
Did you find your birth to be like redemptive in some ways? You talked about how the biggest difference was not being separated afterwards. Was that, I guess, how did the birth go before, you're done giving birth and you're not separated? Was it also different than your first time?
Yes. So, and I was really careful to make sure no one showed up. I think that was the bigger thing. It was also surprise, even though it would have been a planned C-section. He decided. So my water broke like 2:00 in the morning. So it was still, not necessarily planned. He was a little bit earlier. So he spent a few days in the NICU, but they actually let us spend time with him there. So it was different in that, we did the scrambling of like, water broke, let's go. We had to drop our daughter off. And, but I think just knowing that it's going to be a C-section no matter what, I didn't have a choice. I would have loved to do VBAC. But I think for me, with my anxiety, I think in general, I like when I don't have to make a choice.
Oh,
So
I feel
knowing
that.
Same here. Yeah.
So knowing that it was going to be a C-section no matter what, I think, just the whole experience was better. There was nothing, there weren't many surprises. I mean, it still was a weird day. There was like a huge accident on the freeway, and like all of the doctors were from LA. So we had the surgery kept getting delayed because there were literally 0 doctors in the hospital that could perform it.
That's comforting.
Yes. So, it had its challenges, but I think overall it was such a better situation, and everybody, I was afraid of like hurting people's feelings, right? Like our immediate family of like, just give us some time. Like, I'm happy. Like, you get all the baby time, but just give me some time. And they were all totally fine and respectful. They waited until the next day to come. So we had like the full 24 hours of just us. And it's so much better.
Yeah. Good. And even one day is, a lot when you're recovering and
Yes.
still in the hospital. Like, don't come for 3 months.
Or just bring
Only
me
certain
food.
people. Yeah. Deliver food
Outside
at
the
my
door.
doorstep.
I love your stories, and I feel like I love it's cool to take like a birth story and speak with someone whose kids are you have a teenager, and like that story continues and is still going on. Like it's still the same story, and it's really cool to have that perspective of, especially with you being so connected to what your like attachments are with your kids and how that may or may not be affected by a birth and like the choices that you make along the way. So I love your perspective, and it's been so great to hear.
Yeah.
It's crazy to like talk about it all, because it's, it's been so long.
Yeah. Do you feel like you remember parts of it as if it happened just yesterday?
Oh, I do. There's only a handful of days in my life where I vividly remember. I remember the smells. I remember how everything felt. The fabric, the cheap, hospital robe, the smells from the food. Like it's so ingrained that, when I put effort, it's like I'm experiencing it all over again.
Yeah, it's a visceral
Yeah.
experience. I do have one question about your Mexican upbringing and culture, and if there was anything about, like, your mom came and cooked you food, and like what were things that were passed down to you or that you did that's different than how I might do it, or Camarillo folks do it.
So I think definitely, it's a weird thing, culturally, of trying to keep the culture with my kids, right? Even though like we're so kind of far removed from it. So I do the things, the things that culturally you would expect, the cutting up the fruit, and I'll say specifically Mexican, like immigrant families, because there's so much pressure, right, to do all of the things and get your family here and survive and, make enough money for it. There is no emphasis on emotion. So, I make sure that she understands that. I make sure both of them understand that. I'm doing my part, right, to make sure that they have healthy relationships with emotions and communicating them, but also understanding grandparents. Grandparents aren't going to be the same. Their grandma picks them up from school, on their dad's time. Her love language, the way that she expresses her love is she will pack a full lunch and cut up 50 different types of fruits because you mentioned you like all of them, and why just have the one when you can have the choice so that you have literally like a big cooler.
I didn't know I was going to ask you. What does that mean?
Like she bought a cooler specifically to pack their little lunches, and it's just to go pick them up to go home so that she can cook for them. Yeah. So I make sure that I explain to both of them that this is how older generations culturally, this is how they're showing you that they love you. It's different. Mm-hmm. It's different from the way I show you. It's different from the way your friends show you. But I make sure to explain to them where maybe if I had that explained to me, I wouldn't have grown up thinking that I wasn't loved or thinking that I don't know what love is. I don't know what love feels like, so I'm always conscious of the fact that they need to know when someone's expressing emotions to them, good or bad. And they need to know there's things that are outside of them that have anything to do with that. So making sure that I do the things. So they still have the cultural experiences, as annoying as it is, even if they ask me for a cup of water, making sure I put ice in it if I know it's one of the kids that likes ice in the water. But also making sure that we have the conversations, right? And we always go back, whether it was a difficult thing or an awesome thing or a really sad thing, making sure that I hold space for them to have those conversations. Because I do think even for myself, the whole birth experience would have been different that first time, even if I was aware then, which I should have been, right? I was an adult bringing a child into the world. But
you don't know the first time because there's no first time before that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's definitely, it's a challenge, but making sure that they have opportunities to not just experience the cultural things, but to also participate, like actually actively participate in them. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's, it's fun
and
confusing.
With your mom coming for that month of time, was that just a cultural expectation that she would show up and cook for you and be there? Yeah. You didn't have to ask her.
No.
Yeah. That's just ingrained in the culture. You show up in that way.
And it's all the big moments, like even like all of my moves. Like I've never had to ask anyone to help us move. It's just, I let my siblings know this is when we're moving, and a truck full of Mexican shows up.
That's not how it is over here. You have to, which friend can I ask? And then
we're getting older, so you can't ask people anymore.
Yeah,
because we all have bad backs.
Yeah, exactly.
They moved me out. They moved my ex-husband because he was moving the same day. Like they helped pack his stuff. Like, it's hard, right? Because on one hand, you want the emotional part, especially now that I'm learning how to have emotions and what they are. it's still hard. I'm 40 years old and I still have days where I'm like, God, I wish, my mom would just do this thing, right? I wish she would just listen and I wish I could just have a conversation with her, so it's easy to get caught up in what you want out of it, your expectations.
Yeah.
But the parenthood piece has made me step back and really look at, oh, well, she was doing the things that I wanted, right? She loved me and was expressing it in her own way, so it's also having to be aware of that, and I see it with my kids too, because I don't express emotions the way most people do, because I'm learning them with my kids. Like, I'm learning how to do all of that. So also it's giving myself grace, in the interactions with them, of like always going back and saying, I didn't handle that well. This is why, but this is what I meant.
Yeah.
This is what I would have said if I had tools.
It's a really important skill. We don't learn how to repair.
Yeah, it sucks.
I feel like you're giving your kids such a gift, even the one thing you said about
maybe Ari.
explaining that other people express their love in different ways. Like, that's it's seemingly so small, but it's profound. Because I didn't learn about love languages until I was in my 30s, and then it's like your life changes, but you're still having to like re-teach yourself things as you are with emotional stuff, and your kids are like learning it as they're growing, and that's huge.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
Well, they have a really strong sense of self, and obviously what they need and how to ask for things.
Well, and I see it like with Augie too, like the way that he communicates things. I'm like, hold on, I don't want to say anything right now because I don't know what's appropriate. So like, just give me some space. Give me a minute. I'll be right back. Like, I just don't want to say the wrong thing, and so now I catch him, where he was always so reactive. Again, like, because he was used to getting all the emotional stuff, right? He grew up surrounded in safe space to express himself in ways that I wasn't allowed to, in ways that I would get punished for, so making sure that they understand that too, I react that way because I remember how I was received when I behaved the way that you're behaving.
Right.
So I want them to know, yes, this is a safe space for you, 100%. But you still need to, take people into consideration, and not just act based off of your own feelings. And that is tiring. And,
yeah.
And it hurts.
Yeah. And also a skill too, like to teach somebody that you don't have to give an answer right away, especially when, in our culture,
everything's instant.
Yeah. You need to show your worth or that you're good. You have to have an answer right away and be able to articulate yourself well. And if you can't, then there's something wrong with you.
You have to always be producing something. You're always contributing something.
Yeah.
That's not healthy.
No, you can take time to think about something and not have an answer.
And you should.
You should, actually. Yeah. Maybe we'd be more intentional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
You want to ask our last questions?
Yeah, we have two last questions. Which one do you want to ask?
I don't care.
Okay.
Go for it.
I'll ask the first one.
Okay.
What advice would you give to someone who is about to give birth?
No matter how prepared you are. No, I said that weird. That's not what I wanted to say. This is what we're just
talking about. You can take time to think about what you want to say.
I got all day. Not really. I got to get home to Ruby. But no, you take your time.
No, it's about preparation. Not so much, yes, have the birth plan, have all of the things that you need planned, right? But I think for me, the biggest thing that I needed to prepare or help preparing for was my own feelings with the uncertainty. Like, we have to be okay with knowing that even if everything is going according to plan, or if everything's going totally crazy chaos, nothing's going according to plan. At the end of the day, in those situations, all we can control is how we react to them. So in preparing for giving birth, try to prepare the emotional part. Try to be prepared to be unprepared. Because it is like, you can have all of the things and have your special socks or whatever special, music you have in the background, whatever it is, whatever tools you need, you still have to be prepared to be unprepared and to be okay when things go wrong. Mm-hmm. Because I think that's where we all lose it, we prepare all of these things. We think we go into situations emotionally prepared for them, but we're only prepared for the things that we think are going to happen. Mm-hmm. And we have to be okay. And the only reason I say that is because you don't want to look back on whatever happens during your birth story and regret, not being in the moment because you're so wrapped up in, it's not going according to plan. Mm-hmm. Because it is like, it's the memories from those days are ingrained. Like, I don't know, I have never met somebody that's given birth that didn't remember that day down to, specific details. And, think about future self and what you want to look back on. Do you want to look back on, just totally losing it because things didn't go according to plan, or just kind of going with the flow, which is huge, right? Because it's scary. It's mm-hmm. things not going according to plan are life and death, mm-hmm. But so I try to eliminate anxiety and stress.
Like, how can we do that? It's hard.
It's impossible. It is. It really is. And that's why it's like, it's advice, but it's not really. Because
it's a really good goal to have.
It is. I agree.
I would give it the same.
It's sort of like, take all your plans, imagine throwing them all out the window. Then what?
What do you do then? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And what is it going to take for you to be okay with that? Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Who's really going to be there?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
That time.
I think that's good advice.
Yeah. Pretty sound. You've captured. Yeah. Well thought out. Well delivered. You don't need my. It's good on its own.
Gold star.
Gold star.
Okay, well, our last question is, what's something that makes you laugh about either your birth experiences or just being a parent in general?
It's just the kids in general, just watching them. Like, they're so silly, and I say, like, probably my favorite thing about being a parent and just watching kids in general grow is just watching them figure shit out. It's such a silly process. I'll never forget another, like, one of those ingrained memories is like when your kids realize they have hands and feet, mm-hmm. Then they're just there staring at their hands. And it's like such a ridiculous thing, right? Mm-hmm. They're like, oh, there's something connected to my body. That's crazy.
Yeah.
But like all of those little moments of them discovering something, they're the funniest just to see, something that we do or experience every single day is just this brand new thing to them.
Yeah, things that we take for granted.
Their reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And their brain is literally making millions of connections just from staring at their hands.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, I love this conversation.
Yeah. Thank you, Edith. This was great. How do you feel about it?
I feel good. It wasn't as scary as I thought.
Yeah, see?
Good. That's what we want to hear.
You ventured into the unknown, and here we are on the
Yeah.
other side.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you guys for having me.
It's so great to meet you and
Thanks, you
to hear
too.
your stories. And
I love what you guys are doing. I love it. I wish more people talked about just giving birth in general. There's, so much secretive about it that it shouldn't be.
yeah.
Yep, that's what we're trying to do.
Well, thank you for going deep on all the things of all the parts of your story and not holding back. I feel like there were many moments in your story where I was like, yes, this is what we need to be talking about.
Thank you, Edith.
No problem. Thank you guys.
Bye. Bearing Birth is available on all major podcast streaming services. We invite you to subscribe as well as follow us on Instagram at Bearing Birth Podcast.